I've been watching this show that just released on Netflix. It is the Receivers Show, where basically the NFL went around and documented a number of the best wide receivers in the league, as well as George Kittle, and have been. So I've been watching that the past couple the past couple days, and sort of sparked my interest in doing this type of a segment, especially when we're at the point in the year where there really aren't many sports actively going on. So I wanted to give my thoughts on the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. ESPN similarly did their polls a couple days ago, so we'll maybe be comparing a little bit how I put my list together in comparison to ESPN. Number 10, I have Mike Evans. Evans is a player that almost goes taken for granted for at this point, where he was one of the top picks in the 2014 draft, and all he has produced is 1,000-yard seasons. And he just continues to, even as he gets older, he continues to have just such a massive impact on the game, and he is very much part of the reason why they ended up making the playoffs, having a quarterback in Baker Mayfield who, sure, he has talent, but somebody who had been written off a couple times already and was in need of having a go-to number one option, and Mike Evans was that this past year, where he was able to record over 1,200 yards and he led the NFL in touchdowns. So 10 is probably even maybe a little bit disrespectful here. Mike Evans is 30 years old. I think at some point the age is going to catch up to him. We have already seen him sort of throughout the course of his career at least have some sort of struggles with drops. I mean, again, you're talking about a player who gives you so much as it is. It's a little bit hard to nitpick sometimes, but, you know, the drops have been a thing that I feel like he is very much going to be at least semi-reliant on his athleticism. Now, still, the way that he is able to create separation at the line of scrimmage, break past cornerbacks, is something that, again, can't go for granted. But I feel like Mike Evans is at 10 for me in this position because I think it's more so going to be some of the younger guys that are overcoming him. One of those being Brandon Ayuk, who I have ranked here at number 9. Ayuk obviously making a lot of headlines as of late with his trade request, but somebody who has been, again, I think he's in a weird spot when you talk about the evaluation of Brandon Ayuk, because you can use the fact that there are so many other weapons on the 49ers to his advantage, or to try and diminish him as well because of the complications of, yes, opposing defenses are focusing their attention on a number of different weapons in George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, but it's also taking away from the looks that Brandon Ayuk gets. And despite that, he just continues to go out on a weekly basis and perform, and he has been probably the most reliable in terms of availability out of all of their stars, and because of that, he led the 49ers in targets, I believe. And again, he is just an up-and-coming player here that we talked about this earlier this week. It took him a little bit of time to fully break in, but now I think he is fully ready for wide receiver 1 potential, and we are going to have to see whether or not he gets that opportunity this year, or if it's next year following the upcoming, drama that is surrounding him and the 49ers contract dispute. Number 8, right in front of him, I have his teammate Deebo Samuel. Now, Deebo was actually just an honorary mention in ESPN's list, and I have to imagine the biggest reason for that is because of the fact that Deebo's been dealing with a lot of injuries over the course of the past 2 years. But when he's on the field, I think he's as dynamic as any other playmaker in the NFL. So I'm almost maybe even overrating Deebo's upcoming season a little bit. But again, it's a health bet, I think, more than anything with Deebo Samuel. And as long as he's playing, I think he is going to be a massive contributor for the 49ers. Number 7, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL, somebody who just got his big payday this past year, and you can just see the level of workhorse that he is. Again, some really good insights on what goes on behind the scenes with Amon-Ra, the fact that he has this father who has been pushing him to be excellent since he was a kid. I mean, you can see it with the mentality that he plays in, that he's one of those guys that just plays with a different level of aggression. And on top of that, the fact that he is just an unbelievable talent and, is very fundamentally skilled at the wide receiver position. There is a reason where he had 1,500 yards this season, put together an unbelievable season as All-Pro first team, and the future is only going to continue to get brighter with Amon-Ra, who's still just 24 years old. So he can definitely work his way even further up this list. I was kind of surprised I had him this low, but it does go to speak to the elite level of depth that we have at the wide receiver position currently. Because number 6, I have A.J. Brown. Now, he was a little bit quieter down the second half of the season for the Eagles last year as they were going through all of their issues. And yes, A.J. Brown, to some degree, was pretty vocal about his displeasure of his own personal role. But A.J. Brown just makes catches that, literally have my jaw drop on almost a weekly basis. He is a physical specimen, and the way that he is able to make some of these contested catches just absolutely pop off the screen. That, again, it was a really close decision between him and Amon-Ra. I mean, really, every single receiver that I would say cutoff is probably Amon-Ra, but you could even go down to Deebo, again, when fully healthy. These are all elite guys, so it is extremely hard to differentiate, but got to put together the list here. Number 5, I have CeeDee Lamb. Now, CeeDee has been very good for a number of years, but he wasn't elite level play until last year. So if you were to have him a little bit lower because of the fact that A.J. Brown has shown the fact that he can be, a top of the top receiver for a number of years, I will fully hear you out on that one. But CeeDee is just emerged into a different monster this past year, and it's something that I think is going to continue to last for years to come. Led the league in receptions this year with 135. He had 1,700 yards. I mean, this is ridiculous stuff from CeeDee Lamb, and it's the combination of everything in his game. The fact that he does have some of the size to be able to, punish smaller receivers. The burst and the speed that he has. I had him number 5. Now, ESPN did have him slightly earlier, or slightly ahead at number 4, which I think is fair. CeeDee's kind of a weird one to try and place amongst these other great wide receivers because of the fact that, again, it's not like he's ever been bad necessarily. This is, he's the least amount of yards he ever had was his rookie year with 935, and he's been over 1,100 since then. So maybe I'm even doing him a disservice when talking about, it took till last year till he really stood out as one of the elite guys, but I mean, there's no denying his talent now. Number 4 on this list, we have Ja'Marr Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. Chase probably gets dinged a little bit because of the fact that last year was just so weird, that he's been dealing with some marginal injuries, and then there was all of the, changes at quarterback with Joe Burrow dealing with his injuries, Jake Browning taking over down the stretch of the year. But if last season was a down year for Ja'Marr Chase, you are going to take that every time in the long term, and I fully expect him to be back. But again, a lot of really good names on this list, and he comes right behind Davante Adams, who I have here at number 3. Davante is just such a different wide receiver in terms of the consistency. And no, last year with the Raiders was definitely frustrating. And I guess I'm probably going to at some point, again, as we're in this little bit of a slow time, actually dive into the entirety of the receiver show when I finish up. But I kind of came away with, if you'll remember, it was after the Patriots game that they played, and they ended up winning that game, and Davante had that quote that went viral about how he doesn't measure his legacy is not in wins and losses, it's about greatness. And he did further elaborate on that concept, and I did actually kind of agree with him on it. They are paying him to dominate, to be a top wide receiver in the game. And yes, there's some accountability from him if he's not performing at the level. But if you watch the Raiders last year, that wasn't the case. It was a lot of the other instruments here in terms of Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell, and the overall level of quarterback play just was not there. Of course, the Josh McDaniels situation. So, I mean, he's right that if he isn't getting going, then the game plan isn't working to what they were expected to. And granted, in that Patriots game, it was not a good offense. They were just lucky enough to face off against the Patriots, who were incompetent on the offensive end. So again, I was kind of with them on that one, actually, and that's not something that I was expecting going into the docuseries. Of course, that's what a lot of these can tend to be, is a boost in PR, but I believe in the integrity of Davante Adams as well, and he's been one of the best receivers for, I mean, probably close to a decade now. So had to have him in the top 3 for me. Number 2, I had a hard time actually keeping this guy out of the number 1 spot, and that is Tyreek Hill. I feel like because of the fact that Tyreek is so fast that people tend to overlook all the other parts of his game, the understanding of where to go in order to get open, as opposed to just being a burner and running past everybody. It feels like he actually now understands the pockets to sit in and create opportunities for himself. He has incredible hands as well. So I think that ultimately, number 2 and number 1 are neck and neck for me. I guess we'll just dive into number 1 while we're here. I do have Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, just as a pure wide receiver, all-around game, I don't think you can find anybody more talented than Justin Jefferson. And last year he was dealing with the hamstring injury. That definitely slowed him down some, but the Vikings still paid him big this offseason. I expect him to return back to the form that we are used to for him, and it will be interesting to see how things play out from here, because Justin Jefferson is an immense talent, and there is something about him that tells me he's not going to want to sit around with bad quarterback play for a number of years. So we'll see. They, of course, draft J.J. McCarthy in this year's draft, and we'll see how that plays out for them. But he's also going to be a massive piece on whether or not that offense has any success. I believe in Kevin O'Connor. No, I'm confusing the two between the Ringer guy and the Vikings head coach. That's pretty embarrassing on my part. But Kevin O'Connell is who we're talking about here. But shout out Kevin O'Connor as well, I guess. But I think that Kevin O'Connell is a very bright mind from an offensive play calling standpoint, and he's going to do a very good job of getting Justin Jefferson the looks that he needs moving forward for the rest of his tenure here in Minnesota. But let me know what I got right, what I got wrong. Obviously, again, I think that especially the top 7-8 guys in this list are so close that it's kind of hard to differentiate in terms of ranking one directly ahead of the other. But again, let me know what you do think. But we're going to be now taking our first break of the show. When we come back on the other side, we will be diving into the upcoming season predictions for the Baltimore Ravens. So we are going to dive into that. But first, a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.